She ran through the parking lot with a broken heart, desperate to escape her family's humiliation. That's when she saw a stranger leaning against a car and had the craziest idea of her life: to ask him to pretend to be her boyfriend. She had no clue that man was hiding a secret that would change everything. Sarah's hands trembled as she stared at her phone. 15 missed calls from her mother, 3 from her sister, 2 from her aunt. The family dinner was in 20 minutes, and she knew exactly what awaited her inside that restaurant. The questions, the pitying looks, the endless parade of available bachelors her family had somehow managed to dig up from every corner of their social circle. At 32, she was tired of being the family's charity case, the single art teacher who couldn't seem to get her life together while her siblings climbed corporate ladders and built picture-perfect families. She sat in her beat-up Honda Civic, watching happy couples walk hand-in-hand toward Romano's Italian restaurant, and felt that familiar knot in her stomach tighten. "I can't do this again," she whispered to herself. Not another evening of Aunt Margaret asking if she'd tried those dating apps. Not another conversation about how she was wasting her prime years. Not another business card pressed into her palm with some random man's number scrawled on the back. The parking lot stretched before her like a minefield. Every step toward that restaurant door meant walking deeper into their well-meaning but suffocating expectations. Her mother meant well, they all did, but their love came wrapped in judgments she couldn't escape. That's when she saw him. He was leaning against a modest grey sedan, scrolling through his phone. Tall, maybe 6'2", with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it. His clothes were simple dark jeans and navy button-down, sneakers that had seen better days. Nothing flashy, nothing that screamed money or status. Just a regular guy who happened to be alone in a parking lot at exactly the moment her desperation peaked. Sarah found herself walking toward him before her rational mind could stop her. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. This was beyond insane. This was the kind of thing that happened in movies, not to small-town art teachers who spent their evenings grading finger paintings and eating takeout alone. "Excuse me," she called out, her voice higher than usual. He looked up, and she nearly lost her nerve. His eyes were the kind of deep brown that made you forget what you were about to say. There was something about his face, strong jawline, but kind eyes. The kind of man who looked like he'd hold doors open and remember your birthday. "Are you okay?" he asked, pocketing his phone. His voice was warm, concerned. "I know this is going to sound completely crazy," Sarah rushed on before she could chicken out, "but I need your help. I'm about to walk into that restaurant for dinner with my family, and they're going to spend the entire evening trying to set me up with random men and asking why I'm still single, and basically treating me like I'm some kind of tragic spinster who can't function without a man." She was talking too fast, gesturing wildly with her hands. He watched her with an expression that was part amusement, part concern. "And I know you don't know me from Adam, and this is probably the weirdest thing anyone's ever asked you, but would you mind pretending to be my boyfriend for just 1 hour? I swear I'm not a crazy person. I'm just desperate. And you look like someone who wouldn't murder me in a restaurant full of witnesses." The words hung in the air between them. Sarah immediately wanted to crawl into a hole and disappear. What had she done? This poor man was probably going to call security, or run, or both, but instead he smiled. It was the kind of smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes and made her forget, for just a moment, how embarrassing this entire situation was. "1 hour?" he asked. "Maybe an hour and a half, tops. They tend to linger over dessert. And all I have to do is pretend to be your boyfriend? Just hold my hand, maybe? Laugh at my jokes? Look like you actually enjoy spending time with me?" I know it's asking a lot from a complete stranger. He studied her face for a moment, and Sarah found herself holding her breath. There was something in his expression she couldn't quite read, like he was weighing more than just her request. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Sarah. Sarah Matthews." "Nice to meet you, Sarah Matthews. I'm David." He pushed off from his car and extended his hand. When she took it, his palm was warm and steady against hers. "David what?" she asked. "Just David, for tonight anyway." There was something in the way he said it, something that made her wonder if there was more to this simple, casually dressed man than met the eye. But before she could ask, her phone buzzed with another text from her mother. "We should probably go in," David said, noticing her phone, "before your family sends out a search party. Are you sure about this? I mean, I'm basically asking you to lie to a bunch of strangers for someone you've known for exactly 3 minutes. Everyone needs rescuing sometimes," he said simply. "Besides, when's the last time you did something completely spontaneous?" "Never. I plan everything. I make lists for my lists." "Well then, tonight seems like a good night to start living dangerously." He offered her his arm, and Sarah took it, marveling at how natural it felt, how right. Like they'd done this 1,000 times before. "So what's our story?" David asked as they walked toward the restaurant. "How did we meet? How long have we been dating?" "Oh God, I didn't think about that." Sarah's panic started rising again. "They're going to ask questions. So many questions. My mother is like the FBI when it comes to my love life." "Relax. We met at a coffee shop, that bookstore cafe on 5th Street. You were reading something by Georgia O'Keeffe and I asked about it. We've been dating for, let's say, 4 months. Long enough to be comfortable, not so long that they'll expect an engagement announcement." Sarah stared at him. "How do you know about the bookstore cafe and Georgia O'Keeffe?" "Lucky guess," he said. But something in his expression suggested it wasn't luck at all. They reached the restaurant door, and Sarah could see her family through the window. Her mother, elegant in her pearls and perfect posture. Her father, already looking at his watch. Her sister Rebecca, with her successful lawyer husband. Her brother Mike with his pregnant wife. All of them successful, settled, complete. "Last chance to run," Sarah whispered. "Not a chance," David said. "I'm curious to see how this plays out." The hostess led them to the table, and Sarah watched her family's expressions change in real time. Her mother's eyebrows shot up. Rebecca actually dropped her fork. Her father looked David up and down like he was evaluating a business proposal. "Everyone," Sarah said, her voice surprisingly steady, "I'd like you to meet David, my boyfriend." The word felt strange on her tongue, but also oddly thrilling. "Boyfriend," her mother practically squeaked. "Sarah, honey, you didn't mention you were seeing anyone." "We wanted to keep things private for a while," David said smoothly, pulling out Sarah's chair before taking his own. "I hope you don't mind me crashing your family dinner. Sarah speaks about you all so often I feel like I already know you." And just like that, he was in, charming her father with questions about his business, complimenting her mother's jewelry, asking Rebecca about her law practice, and congratulating Mike on the pregnancy. He fit seamlessly into their family dynamic, like a missing puzzle piece Sarah hadn't realized they needed. But as the evening wore on, Sarah found herself studying him more carefully. The way he held his fork spoke of expensive dining experiences. His knowledge of wine made her father nod approvingly. When the conversation turned to art, Sarah's field, he didn't just nod politely. He actually knew things, specific things about contemporary artists and gallery politics that even she sometimes struggled with. "So David," her mother said over dessert, "what do you do for work?" Sarah held her breath. They hadn't covered this. "I'm in business," he said simply. "Nothing too exciting. Mostly acquisitions and development." "What kind of business?" Rebecca pressed, her lawyer instincts kicking in. "Various industries. I prefer to keep work and personal life separate." His smile was polite but final, and somehow Rebecca backed down. Sarah had never seen anyone shut down her sister's interrogation techniques so effortlessly. "Smart man," her father said approvingly. "Too many people live for their work these days." As they waited for the check, Sarah excused herself to the bathroom, needing a moment to process everything. This was going better than she could have dreamed. David was perfect, attentive without being clingy, charming without being fake, intelligent without being condescending. Her family was eating out of his hand. So why did she feel like something was off? When she returned to the table, she found David deep in conversation with her father about international markets. The ease with which he discussed global economics made her pause. Most people in their small town barely followed the local news, let alone had opinions about foreign trade policies. "Ready to go?" David asked, standing as she approached. Her family was all smiles as they said their goodbyes. Hugs all around, invitations to future gatherings. Her mother whispering in her ear about how handsome and polite David was. "I like him," her father said, shaking David's hand. "You bring him around again soon, you hear?" "We will," Sarah promised. wondering how she'd gotten herself into this mess. They walked to the parking lot in comfortable silence, and Sarah found herself reluctant to end the evening. The night air was cool, and David had given her his jacket without being asked. It smelled like expensive cologne layered over something uniquely masculine. "Thank you," she said when they reached her car. "I can't even begin to tell you how much this meant to me. You were incredible in there." "They're good people," David said. "They love you a lot. Sometimes love feels like pressure. I understand that more than you know." Something in his voice made her look at him more carefully. In the parking lot lighting, she could see small details she'd missed inside. His watch, which looked simple but probably wasn't. The way he carried himself, like someone accustomed to being in charge. The casual confidence that came from never having to worry about money or status. "Who are you really?" she found herself asking. "Just a guy who helped a damsel in distress." "David, I teach high school art. I recognize expensive things when I see them, even when people try to hide them. That watch, the way you talked about wine, your knowledge of international business, you're not just some random guy in a parking lot. Does it matter?" "I don't know. Maybe. Probably." He stepped closer and Sarah's breath caught. "Sarah, tonight was the most genuine fun I've had in years. Your family is wonderful, and you're not at all what I expected when a beautiful woman approached me in a parking lot asking me to be her fake boyfriend. What did you expect? Complications, drama, hidden agendas?" He smiled ruefully. "Instead, I found someone refreshingly honest who just needed help escaping her well-meaning family for one evening. So, what happens now? Now you go home, and tomorrow your family stops pressuring you about being single for at least a few weeks. And you go back to your mysterious business acquisitions." Something like that. Sarah felt an unexpected stab of disappointment. She'd known this was just for tonight, but somehow she'd hoped. What exactly had she hoped? "Could I see you again?" The words slipped out before she could stop them. David's expression grew complicated. "Sarah, not as my fake boyfriend, just as, David, whoever David really is." He was quiet for a long moment, and Sarah could almost see him having some internal debate. "One more time," he said finally, "but there are things about my life that might complicate things. Everyone has complications, not like this." But even as he said it, he was pulling out his phone. "Give me your number." Sarah rattled it off, watching him type it in. When her phone buzzed with his text, just his name, nothing more, she felt ridiculously happy. "I'll call you," he promised. "When?" "Soon." He waited until she was safely in her car before walking to his own. As Sarah drove home, she couldn't shake the feeling that tonight had been the beginning of something much bigger than she'd bargained for. Her phone buzzed at a red light. A text from David. "Thank you for tonight. Your family is lucky to have you." She typed back, "Thank you for rescuing me. I owe you dinner." His response came immediately. "I'll hold you to that." Sarah smiled, but as she pulled into her driveway, questions swirled in her mind. Who was David really? Why had he been so willing to help a stranger? And why did she have the feeling that agreeing to see him again was going to change her life in ways she couldn't even imagine? She was about to find out that some lies have a way of becoming more real than the truth, and some strangers aren't strangers at all. They're just people whose worlds are about to collide with yours in the most unexpected ways. Her phone buzzed one more time as she unlocked her front door. Another text from David. "Sweet dreams, Sarah Matthews." She stared at the message, her heart doing something complicated in her chest. How did he make her feel like she'd known him forever, with just a few simple words? Tomorrow, she decided, she'd start trying to figure out exactly who David really was. Tonight, she was just going to enjoy the feeling of having successfully fooled her family and maybe possibly found something real in the process. What she didn't know was that David was sitting in his car 3 blocks away, making a phone call that would set everything in motion. "Cancel my meetings tomorrow," he said into his phone. "I need to do some research on someone. Business or personal, sir?" David looked back towards Sarah's street, where he could just see the light in what he assumed was her bedroom window. "I'm not sure yet, but I have a feeling it's going to be both." David called 3 days later, just when Sarah had convinced herself he wouldn't. She was in the middle of cleaning paintbrushes after her last class when her phone rang, and his name lit up the screen like a small miracle. "I was starting to think you'd decided I was too much trouble," she said, instead of hello. Never. I've been thinking about our conversation, about that dinner you owe me. I remember. When and where? There's a small gallery opening Friday night, downtown. Nothing fancy, but I thought you might enjoy it. Sarah paused, surprised. Most men she knew thought art galleries were boring, places you endured rather than enjoyed. You like art? I'm learning to appreciate it more lately. Something in his voice made her smile. Okay, what time? 7. I'll pick you up. You don't even know where I live. Text me your address, and Sarah, dress however makes you comfortable. This isn't about impressing anyone. After he hung up, Sarah stared at her phone. Every interaction with David left her with more questions. Who suggested gallery openings for second dates? Who talked about international markets like they read the Financial Times every morning? Who drove a modest car but wore a watch that probably cost more than her monthly salary? Friday couldn't come fast enough. When David picked her up, he was driving a different car. Still modest, a black sedan this time, but Sarah was beginning to notice that his modest cars were actually expensive models designed to look understated. The kind of vehicles wealthy people bought when they wanted to blend in. New car? She asked as she buckled her seatbelt. Borrowed from a friend. Mine's in the shop. Another non-answer. Sarah was collecting them like puzzle pieces, hoping they'd eventually form a picture that made sense. The gallery was small but elegant, showcasing local artists. Sarah recognized several pieces and found herself genuinely impressed by the curation. This wasn't some random opening David had Googled. Someone with real knowledge had chosen this event. How did you hear about this? She asked as they studied a series of abstract paintings. I have connections in the art world, David said simply. What kind of connections? The kind that appreciate talent when they see it. He moved to the next painting before she could press further, but Sarah caught something in his expression. Pride, maybe, or satisfaction. Like someone who'd been personally involved in making this exhibition happen. David Chen, isn't it? They both turned at the voice. A woman in her 60s approached, elegant in that understated way that screamed old money. Her silver hair was perfectly styled, her jewelry subtle but obviously expensive. Mrs. Harrison, David said smoothly. What a pleasant surprise. I thought that was you. Though I must say you look different without your usual entourage. Her eyes shifted to Sarah with obvious curiosity. Aren't you going to introduce me to your friend? Sarah felt David's subtle tension, the slight stiffening of his shoulders. Mrs. Harrison, this is Sarah Matthews, Sarah Margaret Harrison. A pleasure, dear. And what do you do? I teach art at Jefferson High School. Mrs. Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly. How wonderful. Public education is so important. And how do you two know each other? We met recently, Sarah said when David didn't immediately answer. David's been showing me some of the local art scene. Has he now? Mrs. Harrison's smile was knowing. Well, David always did have excellent taste in art, and apparently in companions as well. After she moved on, Sarah turned to David. She knows you well. We've crossed paths in business. What kind of business involves elegant older women who clearly run in very wealthy circles? The complicated kind. David guided her toward the wine table, effectively ending the conversation, but Sarah's investigative instincts were fully activated now. She watched him throughout the evening, noting how other attendees seemed to recognize him, how conversations quieted slightly when he passed, how people deferred to him in ways that suggested he was someone important. After the gallery, they walked to a quiet restaurant nearby. Not expensive, not flashy, but the kind of place that served exceptional food without fanfare. The hostess greeted David by name and led them to a corner table that offered privacy. Regular here? Sarah asked. I enjoy places that focus on quality over image. Is that why you dress down? Drive modest cars? Avoid talking about what you actually do for work? David set down his menu and looked at her directly. You're very observant. I'm an art teacher. I'm trained to notice details, patterns, inconsistencies. And what patterns are you seeing? A man who has money but doesn't want to show it. Who knows people in high places but doesn't name drop. Who's comfortable in expensive restaurants but chooses quiet corners. Who knows more about art than most collectors I've met, but claims he's just learning to appreciate it. David was quiet for a long moment. What if I told you that everything you think you've figured out about me is both completely wrong and absolutely right? I'd say that's the most honest thing you've said since we met. And I'd say you're probably too smart for your own good. Their food arrived, interrupting the moment, but Sarah wasn't ready to let it go. "David, I like you. More than I should, considering I barely know anything real about you. But if we're going to keep seeing each other, I need more than mysterious non-answers. What do you want to know?" "Everything. Start with your last name. That's complicated. Everything's complicated with you." David took a sip of wine, and Sarah could almost see him making some kind of decision. "My last name is Chen. I run a company that invests in various industries, including hospitality, real estate, and yes, some art-related businesses." "What kind of art businesses?" "Galleries mostly, some artist representation." Sarah's heart sank a little. "So when you took me to that opening tonight, you weren't just showing me the local art scene, you were showing me your art scene." "Partly, yes." "And Mrs. Harrison sits on the board of several cultural institutions I support." "Support how?" "Financially." The pieces were starting to form a picture Sarah wasn't sure she liked. "How financially?" "Sarah, does it matter?" "Yes, it matters. I'm a high school art teacher who drives a 15-year-old Honda and shops at Target. If you're some kind of art world mogul, then we're living in completely different universes." "Are we?" "Because from where I sit, you're one of the most genuine, passionate people I've met in years. Your universe seems pretty appealing compared to mine." "What's wrong with your universe?" "It's full of people who want things from me, who see me as a means to an end rather than just David." There was something vulnerable in his voice that made Sarah's anger soften slightly. "Is that why you helped me that night? Because I just saw you as a guy in a parking lot?" "Maybe. When you asked for help, you weren't asking David Chen, CEO of Chen Enterprises. You were asking some random guy to spend an evening pretending to care about you." "Chen Enterprises?" Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. "As in the Chen Enterprises, the company that owns half the commercial real estate downtown." David's silence was answer enough. "Oh God." Sarah put her head in her hands. "I asked one of the most powerful businessmen in the state to be my fake boyfriend at a family dinner, and I said yes." "Why? Why would you say yes?" "Because for the first time in longer than I can remember, someone needed something from me that wasn't about money or influence or connections. You needed someone to hold your hand and laugh at your jokes. That's it." Sarah looked up at him, trying to reconcile the man across from her with what she knew about Chen Enterprises. The company was notorious for aggressive business practices, hostile takeovers, and a CEO who stayed completely out of the public eye. "You're him," she said quietly. "The mystery CEO everyone writes articles about, but no one has photos of. I prefer privacy. No wonder you look different to Mrs. Harrison without your usual entourage." "Sarah, I need you to understand something. Everything I've told you about enjoying your company, about wanting to see you again, none of that has anything to do with Chen Enterprises or my business life. When I'm with you, I'm just David. But you're not just David. You can't separate yourself from who you are, what you do. Your company, I looked it up on my phone while you were in the bathroom. Chen Enterprises has been accused of forcing out small local businesses, of caring more about profit than community impact. Not everything you read is accurate." "Then tell me what is accurate." David rubbed his forehead, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked tired. "My company makes hard business decisions. Sometimes that means other businesses can't compete. But we also employ thousands of people, support dozens of community programs, and yes, fund arts education initiatives that directly benefit schools like yours." "Schools like mine?" "Jefferson High received a significant grant last year for arts supplies and programming. Anonymous donor." Sarah stared at him. "That was you?" "My foundation. Which you didn't know about when you met me. So don't look at me like I was manipulating you from the beginning. How do I know what to believe anymore? You believe what you feel, right here, right now, sitting across from me. Do you think I'm lying about caring for you?" Sarah looked into his eyes, those deep brown eyes that had made her trust him from the first moment. "No, but I think you're lying about other things." "Probably. I've been lying about things for so long I'm not sure I know how to stop." "Try. Start with something small." David was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about you every day since we met. Not because you're beautiful, though you are. Not because you're charming, though you are that too. Because when you talk about your students, Your face lights up in a way that reminds me why I wanted to work in business in the first place, to build things that matter. That's not small. Then try this. I drive different cars because I own several, and I forget which one I drove last. I know about wine because I've been forced to attend charity events since I was 12. And I suggested the gallery opening because I wanted to see how you'd react to art in a professional setting versus in your classroom. You've seen my classroom? David's face went carefully blank. What? You said professional setting versus my classroom. You've never been to my classroom. I misspoke. No, you didn't. Sarah's mind was racing. How do you know what my classroom looks like? Sarah, oh my God. You had me investigated, didn't you? It's not what you think. What is it then? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you decided to check up on the crazy woman who accosted you in a parking lot. I needed to know you weren't dangerous. Dangerous, David. I teach finger painting to teenagers. I've had people try to get close to me for money, for business advantages, for all kinds of reasons. I had to be sure. Sure of what? Sure that you were exactly who you appeared to be, someone genuine who just needed help with her family. Sarah stood up abruptly. I need some air. Sarah, wait. No, this is too much. You're too much. I can't date someone who has me investigated like I'm some kind of security threat. She was halfway to the door when he caught up with her. Please, let me explain. Explain what? That you're paranoid? That you think everyone who talks to you has ulterior motives? That you can't have a normal relationship because you're too wealthy and powerful to trust anyone? Yes, all of that. His honesty stopped her. They were standing on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, and David looked more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. Sarah, I haven't had a real conversation with someone outside my business circle in years. I haven't gone to dinner without security nearby. I haven't met someone who didn't know who I was before they said hello. You gave me one evening of being normal and I wanted more. So you had me investigated. So I made sure you were who you said you were. And you were. You are. You're a dedicated teacher who stays late helping kids with their art projects. You volunteer at the community center on weekends. You take care of your elderly neighbor's cat when she's away. You're exactly as genuine as you seemed in that parking lot. How do you know about Mrs. Patterson's cat? Because I'm thorough. Sarah didn't know whether to laugh or cry. This is insane. Yes, it is. I don't know how to do this. Date someone who lives in a completely different world than mine. I don't know how to do it either, but I'd like to try. They stood there on the sidewalk, two people from different worlds trying to figure out if the gap between them was too wide to bridge. If we do this, Sarah said finally, no more investigations, no more lies about who you are or what you do, no more borrowed cars and fake modesty. Deal. And I need to know about your business. The real story, not the sanitized version. That's harder. Why? Because once you know everything, you might not like who I really am. Sarah looked at him. This powerful man who somehow seemed lost and uncertain in the glow of the streetlight. David, I've spent 2 hours learning that you're probably one of the most influential people in the state, and you're standing here asking me for another chance. I think I can handle the rest of your story, even if it's not pretty. Especially if it's not pretty. I don't want pretty, I want real. David's smile was small but genuine. Real is messy. I teach high school. My entire life is messy. Can I drive you home? In which car? The honest one. When they walked back to the parking area, David led her to a sleek black BMW that probably cost more than she made in 2 years. Better, he asked. More honest anyway. As they drove through the city, Sarah found herself looking at the buildings differently, wondering which ones belonged to Chen Enterprises, which decisions David had made that shaped her hometown. Sarah? David's voice interrupted her thoughts. What are you thinking about? How different the world looks when you know who's actually running it. I don't run the world, just my little corner of it. Does that bother you? Sarah considered the question. Ask me again in a month. Planning to stick around that long? Planning to keep being honest that long? And I'm going to try. When they reached her apartment, David walked her to the door, but didn't try to kiss her goodnight. Instead, he took her hand and squeezed it gently. Thank you for not walking away tonight. Thank you for not letting me. Sarah, when you said real is messy, did you mean that? Why? Because there's more to tell you. About my business, about why I keep such a low profile, about why I helped you that night. More secrets, more complications. Sarah leaned against her door, studying his face. How many more? Enough that you might change your mind about wanting to know the real me. Try me. David stepped closer and Sarah caught her breath. For a moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead he whispered, "What if I told you that meeting you wasn't entirely an accident?" Before she could respond, he was walking back to his car, leaving Sarah standing on her doorstep with her heart racing and her mind spinning with new questions. What did he mean, not entirely an accident? Had he planned their meeting somehow? Was everything she thought she knew about that night in the parking lot another lie? She watched his taillights disappear into the night, wondering if she was falling for a man who didn't really exist, or finally getting to know the one person who did. Sarah couldn't sleep. David's parting words echoed in her mind like a warning bell she couldn't silence. Meeting you wasn't entirely an accident. What did that mean? Had he orchestrated their encounter somehow? Was she just another business acquisition to him? She paced her small apartment until 3 in the morning, then finally grabbed her laptop and started digging. If David Chen wanted to play games with the truth, she'd find her own answers. What she found made her blood run cold. Chen Enterprises had been quietly buying properties around Jefferson High for the past year. The coffee shop where David claimed they'd met in their fake story. The bookstore next door. The entire block, actually. And according to the city planning documents she found buried in municipal websites, there were development plans. Plans that would require demolishing the school to make way for a luxury shopping complex. Her school, her students, her entire world was apparently standing in the way of David's next business venture. Sarah's phone rang at 7 a.m. sharp, jolting her awake from the fitful sleep she'd finally managed. David's name on the screen made her stomach clench. "We need to talk," she said instead of hello. "Good morning to you too. Is everything okay? Are you planning to tear down my school?" The silence on the other end was answer enough. "Sarah, where are you getting this information?" "Public records. Amazing what you can find when you actually look." Her voice was shaking with anger. "How long have you been planning this, David? Was our meeting really an accident? Or were you already researching me because I work at the school you want to destroy? It's not that simple. It never is with you. I'm on my way to work. Meet me there in an hour." "Sarah." She hung up before he could finish. Jefferson High looked different as Sarah pulled into the parking lot. Instead of seeing the building where she'd spent 5 years of her life shaping young minds, she saw a demolition target. Every crack in the concrete, every faded paint job, every sign of the school's age suddenly looked like evidence in David's case for why it needed to go. Her students were already arriving, backpacks slung over shoulders, chattering about weekend plans and upcoming projects. Kids like Marcus, whose single mum worked 2 jobs and counted on the after-school art program to keep him safe until she got home. Kids like Emma, who'd never touched a paintbrush before Sarah's class and was now planning to apply to art schools. What would happen to them if the school disappeared? David's BMW pulled into the visitor parking at exactly 8 o'clock. Sarah watched him get out, noting how he looked around the campus with what she now recognized as an appraiser's eye, calculating square footage, evaluating location advantages, seeing dollar signs instead of futures. "Thank you for meeting me," he said when he reached her classroom door. "Don't thank me yet." Sarah's art room was her sanctuary. Walls covered with student work, supplies organized in colorful chaos, the smell of paint and possibility hanging in the air. She watched David take it all in, wondering what he saw, a thriving educational space or an obstacle to profit. "Sit," she said, gesturing to one of the student desks. David looked awkward, folding his tall frame into the plastic chair, and Sarah felt a moment of satisfaction. Let him be uncomfortable. Let him see her world from student level. Now explain. The development project isn't what you think. What is it then? A renovation, not a demolition. Sarah crossed her arms. The city planning documents I found say otherwise. Those documents are old. The project has evolved. Evolved how conveniently? David ran his hands through his hair, messing up the perfect styling. "Sarah, I know how this looks. But you have to understand, I've been working on education initiatives long before I met you. Education initiatives that require buying up property around schools. Education initiatives that require creating sustainable funding for schools that are falling apart. Sarah looked around her classroom, really seeing it for the first time in months. The water stain on the ceiling from last winter's leak. The outdated computers in the corner. The art supplies she bought with her own money because the school budget couldn't cover them. Keep talking. Jefferson High is going to lose funding. The district is broke. The state's cutting education budgets, and this school will be closed within 2 years, whether I buy the surrounding property or not. So you thought you'd help by speeding up the process. I thought I'd help by creating a public-private partnership that would build a new state-of-the-art educational facility with proper arts funding, updated technology, and programs that actually prepare kids for modern careers. Sarah stared at him. You want to build a new school? I want to build the school these kids deserve, but it requires community support, teacher input, and someone who understands what education actually means. Someone like me. Someone exactly like you. David, are you saying you targeted me because you wanted my help with this project? I'm saying I knew who you were when you approached me in that parking lot. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. She sank into her desk chair, feeling everything she thought she knew shifting beneath her. You knew? I knew you were Sarah Matthews, art teacher at Jefferson High. I knew you were passionate about your work, dedicated to your students, and exactly the kind of educator I'd need on my side to make this project work. And you were there that night because I'd been trying to figure out how to approach you for weeks. I knew if I came to you as David Chen, CEO, you'd see dollar signs and corporate manipulation. I needed you to see me as just David first. So you let me think it was an accident. You let me think I was so desperate I grabbed a random stranger. You weren't desperate. You were brave enough to ask for help when you needed it. From someone I thought was a stranger. Would it have mattered if you'd known who I was? Sarah considered the question honestly. Yes. I never would have asked. Because you would have assumed I had ulterior motives. Because you did have ulterior motives. Not the kind you're thinking. What kind then? David stood up from the tiny desk and walked to the window overlooking the school courtyard. Students were gathering in small groups, enjoying the morning sun before classes started. Sarah, I make a lot of money, more than I can spend in several lifetimes. And I've spent the last 10 years building an empire that's efficient, profitable, and completely soulless. Poor you. I'm not looking for sympathy. I'm trying to explain why meeting you mattered so much. Because I could help with your guilt-driven education project. Because you reminded me why I wanted to build things in the first place. Sarah joined him at the window, which was to make life better, to create opportunities, to build communities instead of just extracting profit from them. And you think a new school will do that? I think a new school run by educators who care more about kids than test scores might do that. With proper funding, innovative programs, and teachers who are paid enough to focus on teaching instead of worrying about buying supplies with their grocery money. Despite her anger, Sarah felt a flicker of interest. What kind of programs? Arts integration in all subjects. Technology training that actually prepares kids for modern jobs. Partnerships with local colleges and businesses. Small class sizes. Mental health support. He turned to look at her. Whatever you think would make the biggest difference. Me. The project needs an educational director. Someone who understands kids, knows how schools actually function, and has the passion to fight for what students need instead of what looks good on paper. And you thought I'd be perfect for the job. I knew you'd be perfect for the job. Sarah felt the world tilting again. This whole thing, meeting me, dating me, letting me think you were just some nice guy, all of it was a job interview. No. David's voice was firm. The job offer is separate from everything else between us. How can it be separate? You manipulated our entire relationship. I omitted information about why I was in that parking lot. Everything else, every conversation, every moment we've shared, that's been real. How do I know what's real anymore? Because you know me, Sarah. Maybe not my full name or my net worth, but you know who I am when I'm with you. Do I? Because the man I thought I was falling for wouldn't have lied to me for weeks. The man you're falling for has been lying to everyone for years about what makes him happy, what he wants from life, what kind of legacy he wants to leave. You're the first person I've been honest with about any of that. Sarah's first period students were starting to file into the classroom. She glanced at the clock. They had 5 minutes before she'd have to ask David to leave. I need time to think about this. About the job offer or about us? Both, either, I don't know. David pulled a business card from his pocket, but it wasn't the standard corporate kind. This one had his personal number, handwritten on the back. The job offer stands regardless of what happens between us personally. These kids deserve better than what the system is giving them, and you're the right person to help build something better. And personally, I hope you can forgive me for handling this badly. I should have told you who I was sooner. You should have told me who I was to you sooner. What do you mean? Was I ever just Sarah to you? Or was I always Sarah who could help with the school project? David was quiet for a moment. At first you were Sarah who could help with the school project, but by the end of that first dinner with your family, you were just Sarah, the woman who made me laugh more in one evening than I had in months, who was brave enough to approach a stranger for help, and kind enough to worry about my feelings when you thought you were asking too much. When did you decide you wanted to see me again? When you asked if you could see me again. Not as your fake boyfriend, just as David. In that moment, I stopped thinking about the school project and started thinking about how long it had been since someone wanted to spend time with me just because they enjoyed my company. The first bell rang, and students began settling into their seats. Sarah looked around at their faces, curious, sleepy, excited, worried, each one representing a future that hung in the balance of decisions made by adults they'd never meet. I have to teach, she said. I know. Will you think about what I said? About the job or about us? Both. Sarah turned to greet her students, then paused. David? Yeah? If you really want to build something better for these kids, you need to understand what you'd be tearing down first. What do you mean? Stay. Observe my first period class. See what actually happens in this falling apart building with outdated supplies and overworked teachers. David glanced around the classroom, noting the interested stares from teenagers who clearly recognized that something important was happening. Are you sure? I want you to meet Marcus, and Emma, and Jake, who hasn't spoken a word all semester, but creates the most incredible sculptures. I want you to see what you're really investing in. Okay, but you sit in the back and don't say a word, and you stay for all 4 periods. All 4? If you're going to make decisions about education, you should probably understand what education actually looks like. David nodded and moved to an empty desk in the back corner. Sarah watched him trying to make himself invisible, this powerful CEO attempting to blend in with a bunch of high school sophomores. All right, everyone, Sarah announced to her class. We have a visitor today. Mr. Chen is observing our class as part of a district review. It wasn't entirely a lie, she told herself. He was reviewing the district, just not in any official capacity. As the day progressed, Sarah watched David watch her students. She saw him notice Marcus's concentration when he worked on his self-portrait, the way the usually restless teenager became completely focused when he had a paintbrush in his hand. She saw him observe Emma's careful technique as she worked on a college portfolio piece, the determination in her eyes as she refined details that would help her get into art school. During lunch, David approached her desk while the students were in the cafeteria. They're incredible, he said simply. They're kids. Kids with potential that gets overlooked because they're not great test takers, or because they learn differently, or because they need creative outlets to make sense of the world. Marcus wants to be a graphic designer. He researched art schools during study hall. Did you know he's never owned his own set of art supplies? Everything he uses here stays here. He practices at home with ballpoint pens and notebook paper. Emma's applying to college, first in her family. She's working nights at a grocery store to save money for application fees. And Jake has autism. He struggles with verbal communication, but his art speaks for him. Look at this. Sarah pulled out a clay sculpture from the drying rack, an intricate figure that captured emotion in the curve of a shoulder, the tilt of a head. He made this without any instruction, pure instinct and talent. David held the sculpture carefully, studying the craftsmanship. This is museum quality. This is a kid who gets overlooked in every other class because he doesn't fit the mold. What happens to them if the school closes? Marcus gets transferred to Lincoln High, where the art program was cut last year due to budget constraints. Emma probably gives up on college and focuses on working to help support her family. Jake gets lost in a larger system that doesn't understand his needs. And if we build something new, if we build something right, Marcus gets proper supplies and mentorship from professional graphic designers. Emma gets college prep support and connections to art programs with scholarships. Jake gets an environment designed to help him thrive, not just survive. David carefully returned the sculpture to its place. What would you need? For what? To make this work? The new school, the programs, everything. Sarah looked around her classroom, mentally cataloging all the limitations that held her students back. Smaller classes, better supplies, technology that actually works, professional development for teachers, mental health support for kids, partnerships with local artists and businesses, college and career counseling. And time. Teachers need planning time, and students need time to explore and create, not just cram for tests. Funding. Enough funding that teachers don't have to choose between making rent and buying supplies for their students. What about location? Accessible to the kids who need it most, not some suburban campus that requires a car to reach. David nodded thoughtfully. The current plan is to build on the site where the old factory used to be, 3 blocks from here. It would serve the same community but with modern facilities. And Jefferson High would become community space, maybe keep the gym for neighborhood use, turn some classrooms into maker spaces or adult education centers. Despite herself, Sarah was intrigued. You've really thought this through. I've been thinking about it for 2 years, but I needed someone who understood education to help make it real. Why me specifically? Because when I researched local teachers, your name came up over and over. From former students who credit you with changing their lives. From parents who say you're the reason their kids stayed in school. From colleagues who mention your innovation and dedication. You really did your homework. I always do. The afternoon classes confirmed what David had observed in the morning. Sarah's passion was infectious, her methods creative, her relationships with students genuine. She pushed them to think critically, supported them through frustrations, celebrated their breakthroughs. When the final bell rang and students filed out, chattering about their projects and weekend plans, David remained at the back desk. "Well," Sarah asked, beginning to clean up paint supplies, "I understand now why you were suspicious of my motives. This isn't just a job for you. These kids aren't just students. They're your kids. Every single one of them. And you'd do anything to protect them, including dating a stranger to get my family off my back so I could focus on my work without constant pressure about my personal life." David smiled. "Speaking of which, how is your family handling our relationship now? They love you. My mother asks about you every time she calls." "What do you tell her? That it's complicated?" "It doesn't have to be." Sarah turned to face him fully. "David, even if I can forgive the manipulation and the lies of omission, we still live in completely different worlds. You make business decisions that affect thousands of people. I struggle to afford art supplies for 30 kids. What if those worlds could support each other instead of conflict? How? Take the job. Help me build the school. Use my resources to give kids opportunities they'd never have otherwise. And personally? Personally, I'd like to keep taking you to dinner and learning about your world. I'd like to meet your students officially and hear about their dreams. I'd like your family to stop thinking of me as your mysterious boyfriend and start thinking of me as the man who's crazy about their daughter. You want to be official? I want to be honest. About who I am, what I do, and how I feel about you." Sarah looked around her classroom one more time, seeing it through new eyes. The limitations that frustrated her daily could be temporary. The potential she saw in her students could be fully realized. The compromises she made due to budget constraints could become choices based on what was best for kids. The job offer is real, regardless of whether we work out personally. Completely real. I need someone with your vision and experience to make this project successful. What would my actual responsibilities be? Curriculum development, teacher recruitment, program design, community outreach. Basically, you'd help build the school from the ground up according to what you know kids actually need. Salary? Enough that you'd never have to buy supplies with your own money again. Sarah felt a flutter of possibility in her chest. When would this all happen? Construction would start next summer. We'd need to spend this year planning, hiring, preparing. The new Jefferson Academy could open in 18 months. Jefferson Academy. Unless you have a better name. No, I like it. honors the history while indicating something new. So you'll consider it? Sarah looked at David, really looked at him. Not the mysterious stranger from the parking lot, not the powerful CEO from the newspaper articles, just the man who'd spent a full day in her classroom watching her students and understanding what mattered to her. I'll consider it. And us? That's more complicated. Why? Because mixing business with pleasure rarely works out well. Then we separate them. The job is the job. Our relationship is our relationship. Can you really do that? I think so. Can you? Sarah walked to her desk and picked up the business card he'd given her earlier, his personal number handwritten on the back. David? Yeah? If we do this, the job, the relationship, all of it. No more lies. No more manipulation. No more using me to get to my students or using my students to get to me. Deal. And I want to meet your world too. Your real world. Not the sanitized version you've been showing me. That might change how you see me. Good. I want to see all of you. David stood up from the desk, finally looking comfortable again. Are you free Saturday night? Depends what you have in mind. A charity gala. Very fancy, very public, very much my real world. It'll be in the society pages, there'll be photographers, and everyone will know exactly who you are by Sunday morning. Sarah felt her stomach flutter with nerves and excitement. As your date? As my girlfriend. If you're ready for that, what about the job? Completely separate. You can take the job and dump me, or refuse the job and keep dating me, or whatever combination makes sense to you. Or I could take the job and keep dating you and see what happens. That's my favorite option. Sarah walked to where David was standing, close enough to see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. One more question. Anything. When you helped me that night at the restaurant, when you were so perfect with my family, was any of that real? All of it. I wasn't pretending to enjoy their company or pretending to care about you. I was just pretending I hadn't spent weeks researching how to approach you. And now I'm hoping you'll give me a chance to prove that everything I feel for you has nothing to do with business and everything to do with the fact that you're the most genuine, passionate, beautiful woman I've ever met. Sarah stood on her tiptoes and kissed him, soft and quick, before stepping back. Saturday night then, but I'm wearing something I can afford, not something that costs more than my car. You could wear a garbage bag and still be the most beautiful woman in the room. That's a terrible line. I'm out of practice with dating. Good thing you have a girlfriend to help you improve. As they walked out of the school together, Sarah's mind was spinning with possibilities. A new school, a new relationship, a new life that combined her passion for education with resources she'd never dreamed of having. It was terrifying and exciting and completely unexpected. Just like the man walking beside her, no longer a stranger, no longer a lie, but not yet completely known either. Saturday night would tell them both whether their two worlds could truly become one, or whether some differences were too big to bridge, no matter how much two people cared about each other. But for the first time since that night in the parking lot, Sarah felt like she was about to find out who David really was, and more importantly, who they could be together.